I was conducting a full research to discover whatever jobs were available, no matter how mediocre or unsatisfying. At one of the universities, I was told that if they could obtain appropriate funding to start a branch of study with my input, they would happily employ me as a lecturer in social sciences, behavioral, or forensic psychology. This worried me, wondering if all my efforts in studying in Europe were wasted by coming to Australia on false promises. I was advised that I would have better chances in Sydney or Melbourne. This made me think perhaps I should take a brief holiday and visit Melbourne to see what might be available. They advised me that I might need to wait until the 1990s before being accepted with my qualifications as a professor. There were times I was stressed out for this great mistake I had made in coming to Australia, but I did not lose hope. I had a wife and child I loved dearly, but her fanaticism was worrying. I basically felt being forced to live a pretentious life in regard to the Jehovah's Witnesses if I wanted my marital status to last. I was unable to tell the absolute truth to any of them, for they would only take it as a bad joke. Besides, they were allegedly always right. I have tried and failed each time in doing so. Therefore, I continued doing mediocre and unsatisfying jobs while living in Hobart. This was the time when Magda fully realized my academic background, but she never wanted to take it seriously, for all that knowledge would be completely lost after Armageddon anyway, as she often declared. She was very happy that I was working and bringing the money in for rent, food, and her wonderful baby's needs, and the other expenses for kingdom interests. It was obviously not important if I was satisfied with my employment or not. Although we were not allowed to have any television sets under the rules and regulations set by Magda, almost all other witnesses I have known in Germany and Australia had sets prominently displayed in their lounge, but Magda had to be different. For her, everything had to be just black and white. She would not approve of a hi-fi system either, for it could present problems with temptations to listen to music, therefore interrupting one's constant interest in first seeking the kingdom of God. If I suggested anything about my interest in obtaining a simple music system, she immediately started lecturing me as if I was committing one of the greatest sins and was a young child needing parental guidance for very lengthy periods of time. She even told me, as one could endure, that I was very childish. Occasionally she protested and went to bed, sobbing uncontrollably, often advising me to concentrate on my priorities and act according to my age. This meant that I had to be always vigilant about our faith, about the end times, and most importantly, preaching the truth to the multitudes of people, attending all the meetings in the kingdom halls, and doing some pioneering work, while spending more time on house-to-house activities, and being praised by the elders on the platform. As a man, I was not meant to have any other interests, any hobbies, other than laboring jobs, cleaning windows, and earning some honest money. Much later I learned to my dismay that those witnesses with gaping big mouths were, in reality, recipients of unemployment benefits, which the Australian welfare system provides. But do they realize that they are unknowingly also subsidizing the Jehovah's Witness organization. I wondered if any of those witnesses had any interests or hobbies such as art, design, and photography. Did they also believe that sound systems or television sets were wrongdoers and sinners? Obviously, I was expected only to obey the rules and regulations dictated by Magda if I wanted my marriage to last. She was adamant, telling me that if I loved her, as I often told her, I should never consider obtaining electronic things. She certainly had the formula to literally and foolishly destroy her own family, and I was unsure how long we could last together. I decided to try different strategies, hoping to make our marriage work, but it literally meant that I had to pretend to be what I was not. This seemed to be the only way to survive the ordeal of being married with a Jehovah's Witness who was overly extreme in her resolve. I thought that one could combine some of my interests with theirs and create a tolerable state which could please both sides. In those days, Stanley Kubrick's film Space Odyssey 2000 was released, and I had seen it several times, enjoying every moment of it. Naturally, discreetly, without Magda realizing. Even the musical scores selected in that release were a delight to listen to. On one occasion, I suggested creating a short film clip with one of the young brothers taking on the role of Jesus, preaching to his disciples to love one another unconditionally as he loved them. When creating this film, I utilized some of the musical scores from Space Odyssey 2000. After screening it in their Kingdom Hall, attended by a large congregation, Magda and a few other witnesses criticized me for using pagan music of the godless as in Kubrick's film. I occasionally went to their gatherings in the Kingdom Hall, which was built by the volunteering brothers and sisters, as they called each other, although the local council was unwilling to grant a permit. After the building was completed and certain inspections by the authorities conducted, they could not be forced out. It was also my understanding that the witnesses had the habitual tradition of erecting kingdom halls without approval, as many people confirmed. However, they have always considered their triumphs as the Lord God's blessing. We were told that it was made possible by the enormous amounts of money provided from members of their congregation. I was not sure how they had such huge sums of money available to pay for the properties they bought. Were they borrowing money? Were they getting subsidized by their headquarters? Or were they provided with large sums of donated money by their members who became old? During one of those services, I was asked if I would play the role of Hermes in a sketch they had organized. I even painted a huge cardboard boat and designed the backdrops and costumes. I had to organize the appropriate materials, makeup, and wigs. I wore beautiful blue attire, as the historic Jews and Romans used to wear, with a false beard which needed to be stuck. When the performance took place, the hall was completely full. This seemed to please Magda immensely. I was then asked to conduct Bible classes with some of them. I was going to go along with that, just to please Magda and discover a little more about the workings of their movement, while still remaining absolutely neutral and without judging anyone. However, Jehovah's Witnesses still could not provide any answers to the age-old questions I used to ask, even when a child. When conducting these so-called Bible studies, always shared by Magda, I used to read passages from the Bible, and she used to make comparisons with the information provided in their Watchtower and Awake magazines. Such was my conducting of Bible classes. However, it always remained superficial, as I could not be persuaded to believe in a mythological God who could not prove to me that he independently existed and was not a human creation. I could not understand how a great God could destroy his wonderful creation with multiple excuses, always pointing a finger and judging them in the most jealous ways, and putting them through all sorts of hardships. If a God truly created humanity, why did he or she choose a special group of people, telling them they should not worship idols, but him alone, and after creating circumstances for them to commit incest in order to populate the earth, not to sin? Nothing made any sense, and, like all their members, I was expected to believe everything they forever repeated under the banner of new discoveries issued forth from their headquarters in Brooklyn, New York. Yet they all considered me a faithful brother, while nobody ever questioned me about being or not being baptized in their faith. That was a good thing, for my family seemed to be reasonably well-functioning from an outsider's view. But on one side I was becoming very tired with the jobs I was involved in, and on the other I was inordinately thankful for her helping me regret any involvement with a society bent with what they believed as the only truth. I decided to say nothing to her any longer, and continued with my pretense until the time was right to speak of the truth. Then again things might change, and we could experience real happiness. Hopefully her love would have grown a little more. As you can guess, working in jobs which used to take much of my valuable time provided me with a much-needed escape. Once I applied for a job at Channel 7 Studios in Hobart, for there was a position advertised as a cameraman. During the interview, somebody dressed in a very flamboyant costume with homosexual tendencies asked me a few questions, and promptly told me that with my complete male attitude and lack of knowledge, he could not accept me. When I answered his questions, he told me all what I knew was for color television. They only had black and white television in Australia, and I should have stayed in Europe to work in a color studio. I thought it quite charming indeed. Later I specifically called him on the telephone and told him that it was their loss and no tragedy to me. He may have thought that because I was from a seemingly backward European background, I should not be cognizant about Australian sophistication. I say this because some other people expressed themselves likewise when we talked about this very issue. After arriving in Hobart and moving to our new address, I found a job as a window cleaner, which pleased a number of faithful brothers and sisters. They did not realize nor care how dangerous the job was. I had no idea what it was about, but I was going to try it. With this job, we had to climb outside tall buildings, sometimes in a harness, and sometimes in a basket hanging from the roof. It was a type of job I had never experienced before. There was a new building on Elizabeth Street, several stories high, and I was to assist a window cleaner and detailer from within a basket. My first job was to peel off the blue plastic protective coatings from the aluminium window frames. I was advised not to look down at the street below and only concentrate on the windows in front of me, and I would get used to it very soon. There was also a middle-aged gentleman who had been working with their company for a long time, and being a very heavy drinker even when he worked, he had a fall some time ago from the top floor from one of those baskets, but miraculously nothing happened to him. He had not even the slightest scratch. I was told that it was probably due to his drinking habits. It was a puzzle, but the idea was absolutely scary. We spent about a week doing that job, and then were directed to clean the huge windows of a car dealer's salon. It was also an interesting experience, and gave me a chance to get to know what cars were displayed. What a beautiful opportunity it was, as I applied for a job there, and they were going to let me know when there was an opening as a salesman. After a few weeks, we were told by the cleaning company that they were going to contact us when the next assignment became available, making me realize that this job of cleaning windows was a seasonal one and was not going to bring a regular income. That was a shock for the system, as I had not been informed about the nature of the job right in the beginning. I rushed to search for another job, and followed the advice given to me about not to say anything in regard to my academic background. I found yet another occupation, this time in a city hotel. I was now to work as a kitchen hand, washing dishes for the cooks. It was a messy and very wet job. There were a couple of others who were also washing dishes, and the head chef pushed us to hurry up without giving us any chance to even have a lunch break. He gave me the additional duty of feeding the pigs in the backyard. I was ordered to feed them with all the scraps and lots of tin cans. When I made a remark that when pigs were eating those metal cans, they were cutting themselves and bleeding from their mouths, the chef was unbearably angry, ordering me to just feed them with what they gave me, including the cans, and never question their authority. In the corners of this large kitchen there were heaps of rubbish collected and left to rot. I was to feed that to the pigs as well. In every corner there were several big cockroaches and worms. I was told also to feed them to the pigs, and the whole thing became too much to bear. I survived the ordeal for a short while, but could not and did not want to continue with this experience. Out of protest, I stopped, and especially after the head chef swore at me. I simply washed my hands, packed my belongings, and walked out of the building, while they all looked askance at me, uneasily asking how anybody could dare walk away from that job. I said nothing, and left that luxurious hotel complex. When I spoke about my dilemma, I was angrily criticized by my wonderful wife, making me regret going home. Magda again lectured me about her worries and my need to understand why her priorities had to be my only concern. This made me feel completely lost and devastated. Over the following few days, I was going to search for yet another job and start painting for possible exhibitions of my artwork. I was not going to stop creating art, even when I started to work on a full-time basis. What he is, I know not. What he is not, I know. Socrates.